exactly. So you should see on your screen that we're recording. Let me know if you see that. Okay. So the topic is awakening. And digging right in, it's using words and vocabulary. It can be difficult to discuss this topic. But what I would like to know is, what does awakening mean to you? And are you able to articulate any specific experience that you may have had? With awakening that you would like to try and describe maybe for the listeners to hear? Some question, isn't it?
Even the word itself, what does that mean? To awaken from what? Yeah, my own experience of, I guess, what I would call awakening being becoming more aware of, oh man, so many multi-layered things. How you know, we could talk about, like, you know, how the world really works in inverted commas, which none of us really know anyway. We have ideas, we have perceptions on that. Through what many would call kind of breaking out of the matrix, which, you know, again, yeah. what does that look like? I struggle with it, if I'm honest. It's you know, I didn't have any particularly mind-blowing experience. I've had multiple experiences throughout life, which I guess, if anything, in terms of me, I feel I already saw this thing we call a human experience in the world and life very, very differently to most people I encountered for most of my life. Not, you know, I wasn't like some kind of awakened seer or anything like that, but I definitely had a different perception on life. But in terms of, I guess, what you would call a more spiritual awakening, a more of a deepening of connection, or a realization of a connection with everything that is, all the other stuff that exists, energy, packets of information, whatever you want to call it, the morphic field, blah, blah, blah. That would have happened about 11 years ago, and would have been brought on by, I believe, me having children, when my system, if you like, whether you want to call that higher self or whatever name you want to give it, had always said no. This was a big no. Now, whether that was from birth trauma, from being adopted, that there was something logged in the system to say no, whatever, I did. I went against my better knowings. It doesn't mean I don't love them to bits, but that's what happened. And it triggered me becoming really unwell. And through a process of becoming very unwell and having to ask certain questions, effectively trying everything to try and heal myself, until one day I lay there and I asked what many would call source, you could call it higher self, you could call it the blueprint for life, whatever. How do I do this? How do I get well? And from that point onwards, I was led on a journey of, I'll use the word expansion, through this thing we call a physical body, which is essentially the connection between, whether you call it soul, spirit, whatever we are, I am, somehow within that consciousness, whatever name you want to give it. I believe we have a soul of sorts. Through tapping into this biological virtual reality suit, I was shown things about the way it worked, and it clearly changed its own frequency in the way that it vibrated to allow me access to information that it may not be true, but I believe it to be so. Information regarding the way things work. You know, the fact that there is this. How infinite it is, I've no idea. Field of information. Everything is energy, blah, 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 you know. Planck lengths, Planck speeds. Do we live in a digitized universe, as a DMT experience showed me? Possibly. I don't know. They're all just perceptions, aren't they? So I think because you're speaking to me now, rather than, you know, kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I've gone down the rabbit holes, round the track, and come back to a place where you realise why, and I have for some time now, and this certainly doesn't mean I've got it all sorted. You see why there are these very, very simple things that we're told by who seem to be the really wise sages. Who am I? And be here now. And they can sound so cliched and cheesy, but it's like, now really is all you have. And yeah, okay, you can have an eye on the future, you know, because we're going to. So having hold that loosely. Maybe you don't need that at all. I don't know. But yeah, find out who you are. Know that that's ever changing. But there does seem to be at the heart of this ever changing me, there does seem to be a shape that forms who I am and what I'm here for. Even though that I, persona, whatever you want to call it, evolves. So I don't think that answers the question on what is awakening at all. But yeah, so it's an expansion of your consciousness, an opening of your channels. And we all, yeah, you know, it's a changing of frequency of this physical body that can allow one channel in, it can allow a whole load of different channels in, it can allow a whole load of different channels in, which is why some people are just utterly mind-blowingly genius in some ways and some are in others, and hence why we're all here to, I believe, to fulfill a part of some kind of cosmic jigsaw.
Excellent. Would you say that let me give you an example. In my life, I had some patterns of addiction, patterns of anxiety, patterns of stress, all sorts of patterns that got challenged. And eventually some of these things would fall away. Like, for example, my struggles with alcohol. Eventually, the struggles ended and alcohol disappeared. Is there anything that you can cite in your life where you may have had a challenge with a pattern that fell away?
Oh, yeah. Alcohol is an interesting one because that had already happened before I don't want to call it the incident, if you like, because it wasn't a one-off incident, but, you know, before becoming unwell. So yeah, I mean, if I go back to, or we'll briefly go back to before, you know, that period of time when I kind of awakened, if you like, for want of a better, not a better term, but anyway. And yeah, I mean, in terms of my early drug use, I had used amphetamines quite heavily, what we call speed over here, ecstasy, and other bits and bobs. I'd used cocaine as well, and they were shifted by a couple of experiences that weren't particularly optimal, and B, a shift in environment, quite simply shifting myself to the countryside and away from all of that. And that also feeds into my belief that addictions are largely environmental anyway. We are feeding a situation, or we're escaping a situation, or we're call it emotional dependency, whatever you want to call it. They're largely environmentally driven, but clearly emotionally driven as well. So in terms of addictions in that way, I guess not, but patterns in terms of my patterns of whether it's down to birth trauma from adoption or not, I don't know, but I would have had what's the word I'm looking for, real kind of fear of loss issues, and didn't even realize that they were there in the way that they were. And I had repeated lessons in the early part for the first probably 6-7 years of this period since, this kind of awakening journey, if you like, began. And that fell away. I wouldn't say all traces have gone, but that fell away. It took me a long time to learn, but the universe basically continued to send me lessons. And it would send me a lesson, and the lesson, looking back, was very, very clear. But I didn't get it, so the universe would say, well, I'm going to need to send you a signier sign this time. So here's an even bigger one. And didn't get it that time. And then sent me an even signier sign, and I think I got it. Still takes a while to remove all remnants of stuff like that, because, all these patterns. I mean, there's so many patterns. I could dive into so many things that were around that. I mean, I actually had, thinking about it, yes, I did. I had really appalling, from the early days of me becoming unwell, I had a really, really powerful kind of OCD developed with regards to cleanliness of particularly my hands. And, I'd grown up as a child picking up 2p pieces off the road and sticking them in my mouth just to suck them, So my immune system was absolutely fine. I didn't have any issues with being scared of dirt or germs. And I developed that to the point where I would wash my hands to the point where they'd almost bleed, and I would do that day in, day out, repeatedly. And through that period, it allowed me to see what that was and to overcome that. And yeah, there were lots of the little ones that, looking back, yeah, I think I'm getting a bit vague on that now, but it's, I certainly got sent a lot of lessons that I hadn't seen before, which made me look at things and realise that I had fears about certain things. Authority, possibly no, that wasn't so much of a fear, that was more of I like to challenge it. Anyway, so I learned how to do that in a way of bringing remedy rather than straight up challenging.
Okay, thank you. Would you say that awakening shifts perception?
Hugely so. This is one of the reasons why I'm challenged in answering these questions, like the last one, is because my perception has shifted so much. So, one of the things that I feel really, really blessed about my own journey was that one of the first things that happened was an unlearning, an unknowing. So rather than where I see, and I hope I don't come across as being judgmental, because it certainly isn't meant this way, I see a lot of people have a so-called awakening, and they go from having one set of beliefs to swinging the pendulum completely the other way. And because they no longer believe in what they perceive as traditional beliefs or these beliefs or whatever, it's like now everything that they believe is right. This is the truth, this is the red pill, this is the answer, this is all of that. And I think we've seen a lot of that happen over the last Well, we've seen it throughout a lot of the last, I would imagine, last 50, 60 years, but certainly the last 5, 10 years, we've seen a lot of that happen. And the dogma has basically just swung from one end of the pendulum to the other. And yeah, I feel very, very blessed that that didn't happen to me. And it kind of made things more challenging in many ways, though, because I was looking at all these people that, you know, now saw certain things a certain way, and you would be able to talk to them about that and agree with them on these things. But yet there was no seeing of the nuance there with a lot of these subjects and a lot of things surrounding them that, you know, I don't want to say they were being pulled into a certain way of thinking that could have also been hijacked for manipulative purposes. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, and I don't claim to. But yeah, I mean, from my own personal perspective, it shifted my perception to a point where I don't sit on the fence, but I see the nuance in everything to a degree where there really is. I don't want to say there's no right and wrong, because I do still have, or I would say I've relearned or acquired new beliefs or knowings. I know that people would argue they're different, but I hold beliefs with a much, much softer touch, if I have any. Yeah, there's very few things that I believe that I'm absolutely set on. In fact, I don't know if there is anything I'm absolutely set on, because it's all based on now. You know, in the same way that science has a replicability problem, because you can't repeat experiments because they're also down to observation. We know this. We know that observation changes everything, and you know, obviously, if we perceive something in a different frequency, you know, we could get into that multiple realities, all based on different frequencies, and so on and so forth. So yeah, yes, it changes perception. I've extended my answer a bit there, but it changes perception massively, and in different ways for different people.
Do you have any hobbies that were embellished? Or maybe embellished isn't the right word. Like, for example, I play harmonica, and harmonica became very important in awakening, and my body became the instrument. And through breathing and through playing this instrument, the relationship of getting to know my body, to know the breath, through playing this very little simple instrument, became really almost kind of an ongoing miraculous experience. Do you have any hobbies that you really enjoy that through awakening that you got closer to?
No, and I wish I had. I dropped a number of things. Like, I lost all interest in sport, even those, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say I was anywhere near as interested in sport as I had been in my earlier days anyway, but I lost all interest in sport whatsoever. I did acquire a desire to finally start doing things that I'd not done before, like playing guitar, which I'd meant to do for many, many years. And I bought a guitar, and I have started playing, and I've been playing for a little while, but it took me a long time to do that. Same as you with the harmonica as well. But I didn't give these things the time I would have liked to, because I allowed myself to be drawn into that place of spending my time to earn that thing called money to get by and survive. And that pulled me away, because I was very distracted in that area too. There was this thing that I do that I love, and I'm therefore, for want of a better way of putting it, very, very good at, in terms of helping people. But it was something that I really struggled to explain to people what I did, because it was so expansive because of what I'd learned, what I could offer. And that meant that it didn't become a thing that brought in money for me, because I just wasn't promoting it right or doing things the right way, and there were many challenges in that area. So I'd then get pulled this way, or I could earn money this way and earn money that way. That would allow me to do that. And I allowed that to distract me from doing those other things. But I did, because of how I had healed from being unwell, I continued to do those practices very, very much so, which are based around what many would call somatics. There's elements of breath work in there, there's elements of movement in there, but essentially it was a connecting with the body in such a way that the body heals itself, because you create a dialogue with it and connect with it in such a way that it then continues to communicate with you and let you know what it needs in many, many ways. And then all you have to do is either bring your awareness there, because awareness is curative. Obviously it's a subtle thing in terms of how we play with that, because you focus on something too much, you can perpetuate it. So it's a very interesting thing. But yeah, I practiced that all the time, and that enabled me to then share that with others, to kind of, as much as I'm not really a fan of the term holding space, seems to have been whatever. So like any of these phrases, when you hear them everywhere talked about in certain ways, it doesn't irk me. It's just like, do I want to use that phrase? Do you know what? Let's use it. Holding space for people to access their own body, self, whatever, the morphic field in that way, so that they're empowered to go and heal themselves. And I absolutely love doing that, because it's the most simple thing in the world, but so powerful, and it gives somebody the tools, with the tools being the most simple thing ever.
And here's a big question. I've asked you lots of big questions, and feel free to answer this, obviously, in any manner that you wish. What is one thing that you know for certain?
Oh, wow. Oh, well, the first thing that comes up that I know for certain is that everything that we call dis-ease, trauma, beliefs, obviously depending on how tightly you hold that belief, they are all restricted movement within this thing you call a physical body, and can therefore be dissolved through movement.
Excellent.
What else do I know? You didn't ask me for more than one. I'm trying to think of something bigger, more godly. I know that love really is the answer to everything, but also that we're still learning what that means, what that word means. And as we do, and I'm certain we are, as a species, bit by bit, that we are going to go on to truly, truly wonderful things.
Excellent. All right, well, that's it. We are at the end. I'm at the data limit for the recording. I want to thank you for coming on, and maybe we can do it again sometime, but I really appreciate you sharing. And we'll go from there.
It's an absolute honour to be on with you, brother. You are, what can I say? You're one of the most beautiful people I've ever met. So, yeah.
All right, Andrew. Take care, buddy.
You too, man.